But the greatest one to me was that I denied the Trinity. You know, I mean,
That's
which
right,
is
they said that.
absolutely absurd to me. Jesus Christ, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit.
In April of 2026, Paula White stood inside the White House and told Donald Trump he had suffered exactly what Jesus Christ suffered. Weeks earlier, she stood before her own congregation and refused to pray over them until they handed her $10,000 each. This is not something from her past. This is happening right now. And these two moments reveal just how far her megachurch empire has fallen from the image she spent decades building. You'll be shocked to know what is actually happening behind the scenes. The empire she runs. From the White House, now. Most people who know Paula White think of her as someone from the past, a face from Donald Trump's first term, a name that faded once the cameras moved on. That is exactly the version of her story you are not getting here, because it is wrong. Right now, in this exact moment, Paula White does not run a fading ministry from the sidelines. She runs a formal office inside the federal government. And she is still finding new ways to test how far people will let her go before they stop trusting her completely. In February of 2025, Trump signed an executive order creating the White House Faith Office and placed Paula White at the head of it as senior advisor and special government employee. Her own coalition, the National Faith Advisory Board, claims more than 70,000 affiliated faith leaders and now reaches into departments across the entire federal government. That single fact tells you almost everything about where this story stands right now. A woman whose own church nearly collapsed under a Senate investigation is now shaping federal religious policy for the whole country. She did not slow down once she got there. In February of 2026, at her Unleashed conference in Apopka, Florida, she stood in front of a full room and said she wanted $100,000 to come in that night. She broke it down out loud, saying 10 people could each give $10,000 and 100 people could each give $1,000. Then she told the room she was not going to lay hands on anyone until they were obedient. She called it a sacrificial seed for a friend's ministry and told everyone, in her own words, "This isn't for me," while instructing them to make every check payable directly to Paula White Ministries. If that sounds familiar, it should, because it is not new behavior for her at all. Melissa Rogers, who ran that exact same federal office under two different presidents, has publicly pointed out that Paula White was making nearly identical pitches years earlier, back in January of 2018. When she asked her followers to send her their entire first paycheck of the year. 8 years had passed between the two asks, yet it was the same script every time. The same promise that giving to her equals receiving from God. Then, in April of 2026, at a White House Easter lunch, she stood next to the president and told him directly that no one had paid a price like he had paid, that he had been betrayed and arrested and falsely accused. The same pattern, as she put it, our Lord and Savior once showed the world. She compared a sitting president to Jesus Christ, to his face, inside a federal building. A Franciscan friar publicly responded that no one should ever place themselves in the position of Christ. Around that same period, she was quoted telling a crowd that opposing Trump was the same thing as saying no to God. To understand how someone ends up here, you have to trace back everyone and everything she left behind on the way up, starting with a legendary rock band that never asked to be pulled into her financial orbit in the first place. A legendary band she never asked to join. Rewind a few years, and you find Paula White's name showing up somewhere almost nobody expected, tangled inside one of the most famous rock bands in American history. In December of 2022, Journey guitarist Neil Schon sent a cease and desist letter, not to his bandmate Jonathan Cain, who is Paula White's husband, but directly to Paula White herself. The letter accused her of improperly appearing as an authorized signatory on the band's bank accounts, accounts that were only ever supposed to be controlled by Schoen and Kane personally. Her attorney called the claim nonsensical, insisting she had only signed as co-trustee of her husband's personal trust, a structure her lawyer said Schoen's own legal team had actually recommended in the first place. What almost nobody connects to this story is what actually set that letter off in the first place, and it was not the bank account at all. Weeks earlier, Jonathan Cain had performed the band's biggest hit for Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, backed by a chorus that included sitting members of Congress and prominent political figures. Schoen's camp was furious, insisting the band was never supposed to be political, and Paula White's name got pulled directly into the fallout because of her marriage and her politics. That dispute never actually went away. It kept growing year after year, and by 2025, Jonathan Cain was countersuing Neil Schoen over use of the band's corporate credit card, with Paula White's name still caught in the middle of a lawsuit involving one of the most beloved bands of an entire generation. A lot of you probably grew up on that band's music, which makes it stranger still that her ministry controversies eventually reached far enough to pull a piece of your own soundtrack into all of this. This pattern, her presence slowly turning ordinary institutions into headlines, is not limited to a rock band. It runs much deeper, into religious circles most people have never even heard of. And what she said out loud on a stage in South Korea connects two of her strangest claims into a single, devastating thread. The cult leader she called a jewel from God. In May of 2023, standing on a stage in Seoul, South Korea, at the Universal Peace Federation's Peace Summit, Paula White told the audience something remarkable. She said that decades earlier, after building what she called the first AIDS home in Pretoria, South Africa, she had personally worked alongside Nelson Mandela to help abolish apartheid. It is a powerful claim, the kind that makes a room go quiet. There was only one problem. The Nelson Mandela Foundation, which keeps the complete archive of his life and work, searched every record they hold and found absolutely nothing connecting Paula White to Mandela in any capacity. Their head of archive and research told reporters plainly that there is nothing on Paula White in their files. Her office never responded when asked to explain where the story came from. Almost nobody has put the next detail together before, and once you hear it, that entire speech sounds completely different. In that same address, seconds after finishing the Mandela story, Paula White used it as her emotional bridge into praising the woman standing beside her on that stage, Hak Ja Han Moon, widow of Unification Church founder Sun Myung Moon, a movement most Christians consider a cult, and whose followers are widely known as Moonies. She called Moon a jewel from God. This was not the first time either. She had already praised Moon publicly at a Unification Church rally in December of 2021, again in August of 2022, and again in 2025, telling Moon she believed in her calling and her assignment from heaven. Then, in September of 2025, that relationship turned into something far more serious. Hak Ja Han Moon, the same woman Paula White called a jewel from God, was arrested in South Korea and charged with bribing a former First Lady with a designer handbag and a diamond necklace, along with funneling illegal cash to a sitting lawmaker. She stood trial that December. The spiritual leader Paula White spent years vouching for is now a defendant in a bribery case most Americans have never even heard about. She is a woman with genuine access to the President of the United States, fabricating a story about one of history's most respected human rights leaders in order to build credibility with a religious movement now facing real criminal charges. And it still was not the strangest thing she has ever said from a pulpit. The prayers that went viral for all the wrong reasons. Long before any of that, Paula White had already built a habit of saying things from the pulpit that made an entire country stop scrolling. In January of 2020, a clip surfaced from one of her sermons where she can be heard commanding all satanic pregnancies to miscarry right now, her exact words. The clip spread everywhere, viewed millions of times within days. She responded that she had simply been praying a specific Bible verse about spiritual warfare, and that critics had ripped her words out of context for political gain. Jesuit priest James Martin responded publicly that no pregnancy is satanic, and that nobody should ever pray for a woman to lose a child. Whatever her true intention was, the damage to how people saw her had already been done. Then, only months later, in November of 2020, days after the presidential election, another video went viral. This one showing her praying in tongues and calling for what she described as angelic reinforcement from Africa and South America to overturn the election results in Trump's favor. African commentators and journalists were especially vocal, pointing out how strange and uncomfortable it was to hear an American televangelist summon spiritual help from an entire continent to fix an election that continent had nothing to do with. These were not isolated incidents either. Years earlier, in the summer of 2015, months after marrying her third husband, Journey keyboardist Jonathan Cain, the two of them preached together on marital intimacy in front of the full congregation, reportedly with teenagers sitting in the room. Cain told the women listening that they should find out how far their husbands wanted to go and suggested that couples watch intimate content together to learn what turned each other on. Paula White laughed on camera through the entire moment before trying to walk the comment back. Plenty of people know that particular kind of discomfort. The moment at a gathering when someone says something so far out of line that the whole room goes quiet before anyone knows how to react. That congregation lived through exactly that, except it was coming from their spiritual leader, not an uncle who had one drink too many. Even her theology around faith itself became a controversy. In June of 2023, sitting outside a hotel in Jerusalem, she told a reporter that Christians should not attempt to convert Jewish people, breaking sharply from decades of mainstream evangelical teaching on evangelism. Critics accused her of placing political alliance ahead of the very faith she claims to represent. Each of these moments alone might be forgivable. Stacked together across less than a decade, they stop looking like isolated mistakes and start looking like a pattern of someone who says whatever keeps her relevant in whatever room she happens to be standing in that day. None of these headlines explain the real reason her actual church, the one she was supposed to be shepherding every single week, quietly emptied out from the inside. For that, you have to look directly at what happened to the congregation itself and what her own son eventually admitted about why. The congregation that learned what her name was worth. In August of 2011, New Destiny Christian Center's founding pastor, Zachary Timms, died in a hotel room in Times Square from a combined overdose of substances. Paula White was appointed senior pastor shortly afterward, and the decision was controversial from the very beginning. Timms's widow and co-founder, Reva Timms, opposed the takeover, and many within the church's leadership and its historically black congregation viewed the choice as troubling. Still, White took over a church with roughly 8,000 members. By 2017, that number had collapsed to fewer than 500 people, a loss of more than 90% of the congregation in just 6 years. The part of this story almost nobody talks about comes directly from inside her own family. Her son, and then associate pastor, Bradley Knight, told the Washington Post, on the record, that the church lost between 200 and 300 members and roughly $10,000 a week in giving specifically because of his mother's closeness to Donald Trump. He said black community leaders had told her directly, in his words, "You betrayed us." In 2019, White stepped down and installed Bradley and his wife Rachel as senior pastors. The church was renamed City of Destiny and later rebranded again as Story Life Church. Recent footage circulating online shows the congregation now seated around tables instead of rows of chairs, with the band moved down to the floor, because the stage built to face thousands of people now looks almost absurd facing whoever remains. To get this idea of where all of it actually started, you have to go back even further. to a scandal involving one of the most recognizable faith healers in the world, and a photograph neither of them could ever fully explain away. The photograph that outlived every denial. In the summer of 2010, the National Enquirer published photographs of Paula White and televangelist Benny Hinn holding hands as they left a hotel in Rome. Hinn was still legally married at the time, though his wife Suzanne had filed for divorce that February. Both of them denied any romantic relationship immediately. White insisted they were never alone, always surrounded by staff and associates. Hinn called the accusations lies and insisted their friendship had remained morally pure at all times, his own phrase for it. Then, in February of 2011, Hinn's own book publisher, Strang Communications, filed a lawsuit against him for $250,000, alleging he had violated the morality clause in his book contract. According to that lawsuit, Hinn had privately admitted to his publisher back in August of 2010 that he was in what the filing called an inappropriate relationship with Paula White. Read that timeline again slowly, because it genuinely matters. He privately admitted the relationship a full month before both of them stood in front of the public and denied it had ever happened. That gap between what he told his publisher behind closed doors and what he told the world on camera is the real scandal here, far more than the photograph itself ever was. For a congregation already reeling from a divorce and a Senate investigation into their pastor's finances, watching her name get tied to one of the most famous faith healers on television in the middle of his own marriage falling apart was one more reason for people who had trusted her for years to simply stop showing up. That divorce and that Senate investigation were not separate problems happening to separate people either. They were unfolding at almost exactly the same time, tangled into each other in a way that makes the earliest years of this entire story the most revealing part of all. The investigation and the divorce that started it all. To really understand how someone builds a pattern like this, let's go all the way back to where it actually began, in 1991, when Paula White and her then-husband Randy White founded a small church in Tampa, Florida, that would eventually become Without Walls International Church. It grew from an outdoor tent revival into one of the largest churches in the country, reportedly the 7th largest in America by 2004, with around 20,000 members and reported contributions near $150 million between 2004 and 2006 alone. In 2007, Senator Chuck Grassley opened a formal Senate Finance Committee investigation into 6 major televangelist ministries, including Without Walls, over how they were spending tax-exempt donations and what their leaders were paying themselves. The Senate's own staff review later showed Randy and Paula White each drawing compensation over $1 million a year, on top of the church purchasing over $500,000 in inventory from companies the couple personally owned. Former staff members reportedly wanted to speak with investigators but were afraid of being sued by the church, with at least one of them reminded of a confidentiality agreement they had already signed. No subpoenas were ever issued. The investigation quietly closed in 2011 without real consequences, and Paula White publicly treated the outcome as though she had been fully cleared, even though her ministry was one of only 4 that never gave investigators complete information in the first place. The same year that investigation opened, in August of 2007, Randy and Paula White announced their divorce to the entire congregation. A church built entirely around the image of a unified pastoral couple never recovered from that alone. Properties went into foreclosure. The Lakeland campus had its electricity shut off in 2011 after failing to pay more than $50,000 in bills. By 2012, in a lawsuit connected to that foreclosure, Without Walls accused Paula of taking roughly $2 million in music and video equipment to outfit the new church she was already building in Apopka. Without Walls International Church officially filed for bankruptcy in March of 2014. Paula White has survived many collapses by finding a bigger platform before the last one finished falling apart. And right now, she is standing on the biggest one of her life. Tell us in the comments which part of this story shocked you the most, because we are far from finished following her.